In this episode, I'm going to review what's been done so far on the rat rod and maybe a little bit about what we're going to be doing in the future. To get started, I wanted to explain what I did to the frame when I first got it. Stripped everything off it, so it was down to just the bare main 2 channels and a couple of cross supports. There was a lot of brake linkage and pieces like that, brackets, things like that that weren't going to be used. Cut all those off, removed those, so I had a clean channel or clean frame with the two main channels and the cross supports. Cleaned up a lot of the rust that was on that. There's quite a bit of surface rust. Cleaned that off, and then I boxed the 2 lengthwise channels. A lot of you probably know what boxing a frame is, but there's probably a few of you out there that don't know what it is. So I've got this nice visual aid here to explain what that is. This represents the main channel, the frame running the full length of the vehicle or of the chassis, and it's open on one side and it's pretty much that size. So what I did is I took some 12 gauge steel, welded it to the channel like that along the full length in different spots over, to allow it to cool and to try and reduce any warpage. But after you get that all welded together, makes for a good stiff, rigid frame that will eliminate a lot of flex, any movement that you really don't want in that frame. So now that everybody knows what boxing a frame is, let's go to the front end of the chassis and I'll show you what I've done there so far. Okay, at the front of the vehicle, to start out, I added this cross tube to tie each side of the frame together. I removed the existing or the original spring mount and added this cross tube welded into the frame. The front spring is captured on this 1/2 inch plate and held on there with these 4 grade 8 bolts. I made up the upper shock mounts from, I think, tubing that I had laying around. I purchased this front spring assembly, axle, the 4-link, the shocks, the steering mechanism, which I don't know if you can see that well from there. This is a front panhard bar, the drop spindles, the axle, as you can see, hopefully you can see, comes up and over and drops the front about 3 or 4 inches. When I removed the original spring mount, that actually sat lower, which raises the car up, and with this mount I gained about 2 or 3 inches in its height, so the frame sits lower. It has disc brakes in the front, calipers are mounted back here. No brake pads in there yet. I need to run brake lines yet. I need to mount a master cylinder yet. I think that's about it for the front end. There is, I doubt you can see it from here, but there is a Vega steering box that I had to make a mount for, and that sits back under the engine there, mounted to this side of the frame. This gives you a little better view of the back side of the front axle, this side of the steering, side view of the 4-link. Had to weld that mount right there onto the frame. I had to make up these motor mounts. kind of see what those look like. They're bolted to the block. Now going underneath the vehicle, you can see mounted there in black, that is the Vega steering box. Why it's called the Vega steering box is it came out of an old Chevy Vega, or it was patterned after that. Excuse the unsteadiness. You can see the pitman arm right here and the steering linkage a little better. Still underneath the car, there's a look at the underside of the motor mount. 4 bolts holding it to the frame, and then the 1/2 inch bolt that goes up through, which picks up the half of the mount that's on the attached to the block. You can see the boxing of the frame. There's a hole there that gives me access to bolts. I'm going to have to bolt onto the side of the frame. The 4-link mount. Moving back towards the back of the vehicle, this is the transmission mount, or transmission cross member. I had some, I think that's 2x2 quarter angle iron that I formed to mount the transmission to. More box frame. Another view from the underside. That's the input shaft of the Vega steering box. When I get the steering wheel installed, and it'll attach to that that input shaft right there. Now moving to the rear of the vehicle, this is the differential. Part of the triangulated 4-link. Those I fabricated using DOM tubing with right hand and left hand threaded bungs on each end of the link, each link, so that when you rotate the link either clockwise or counterclockwise, you'll be able to increase or decrease the length of that each link, and that'll allow you to set pinion angle and adjust the traction to whatever you need to be. Another look at the triangulated 4 links, one side here. Hopefully that light isn't washing this out. Now at the very end, very back of the chassis, we have the differential, the coilovers. Coilovers are adjustable so that you could increase or decrease the tension on those springs. "10-bolt rear end. Unfortunately, it's a non-posi-track. So here's the side of the frame, coming back. There's the outer lower link mount, and there's the upper inner link mount. There's the chop where I lowered the frame about 6 inches, and you can see the back there's the coilover. overview of the chassis. There's still a few things that need to be done to it, obviously. Brake lines, brake shoes in the back. I've got all those parts and pieces, but I haven't installed those yet. Front brake pads and brake lines need to be done. The steering needs to be installed, linkage to that, but I need to get the body on the chassis before I can do that. Lots of electrical. That's probably the bulk of it. We'll go on now and I'll show you what I've done with the body so far and how that's constructed. Okay, here's the body. Please excuse my shakiness on this camera. I'm not real steady at this, so. But the front cab is what I'm using off from the original body that I bought. The rear end was in pretty bad shape, so I decided to add on the back end, kind of like a truck, and be able to lift the wheelchair and drop it down inside of the back. I'll move down that way here in just a second, but this is what the front of it looks like. The lower part of the cab, down there you see the line. That's where that was all rusted out on both sides, and I patched that. Apparently this thing was originally a part of standard gasoline. It'd be kind of interesting to see what the history of this vehicle actually was, but I have no idea. But this is the back end that I added on. Up here in this upper part, I had to roll form the bead going up and around to match that body line on the cab and the door. Let me move down. Hopefully you don't get seasick. As you can see, I still have to cut and fill in pieces here. I think I ran out of proper gauge metal, so that's why that's open there. Hopefully this thing doesn't get too wavy when I start welding those pieces in. I got to go back across the back there, following that body line, up and around, go around to the other side. Hopefully the wheelchair will fit in there. Measured it. I think it's pretty tight, but I think it'll go. I'm going to swing around to the back. So this is what the back end looks like. My plans are to put 3 lights into each side of these little humps. And also where you can see this upper black line in the 2 kind of quarter circles. That is going to be where I'm going to mount the license plate. I'm going to recess that in about an inch and a half or so. I still have to figure out how I'm going to curve this back end down underneath. This is the passenger side, looking at it from the back. Okay, this is the passenger side. The door open. I don't know if you can tell that grayish area along the bottom of the door. That is actually wood, and there's wood going up the edge, or actually around each outside of the doors. I used a lot of wood in these, which I plan on replacing with metal where I can. In fact, the whole frame underneath was all made out of wood originally. All this framework down here was wood originally, and I still have that chunk of wood that was made out of, but it was rotted out in a number of places. So I decided I had a lot of this 4-inch channel laying around, so I used the wood as a pattern, laid this over the top of it, and pretty much duplicated what was there. All of this smaller burgundy colored tubing is some 1-inch square tubing that I had from other projects. And that's what I used to kind of make the skeleton. This is the trunk area. Where the wheelchair will be stored. So I need floor pans yet for this. I also need to make a dash for the gauges, and preliminary I'm thinking I'm going to go from the dash down along the center and build a console. There'll be bucket seats in this, and there'll be a console going from front to back. As I mentioned before, the front of the cab, lower part of the cab was rusted out pretty bad, and that's a little patch panel that I welded in there. This large hole is for the gas tank goes there. I have the gas tank is over on a bench. I don't think I'm going to use it as a gas tank though. Something about having that a whole 15, 20 gallons of gas right in front of you doesn't seem all that safe. So I plan on putting the gas tank back in the back, probably on one of the two sides. Down here is one of the front fenders. Here's the fender from the front. From the side. Now this fender originally was squared off. Back here, it was squared off. I rounded it off. It would have been squared off and run into a running board that would have ran along the side of the vehicle. And it was about probably 8-10 inches wide. And that's an interference issue for me as far as getting into the vehicle. That would mean that I would have to almost transfer onto the running board, then transfer into the front seat. And by rounding it off, I'll have a lot of space where I'll be able to get right up next to the door and transfer right into the seat. Makes for a much easier transfer. Here's the fuel tank sitting up here on the bench. So it goes down into that hole in the front of the vehicle underneath the windshield, or in front of the windshield. And I think it's actually part of the dash. I think over there where the green tape is the fuel level. Now you can see here all the sheet metal is just tacked on, and eventually I have to go back through and tack all that so it's solid. You can't just do a continuous weld, it really warps the metal. So you just tack it and you keep filling in between. And then after you've got it all pretty much filled in, there goes the heater. After it gets filled in, then you grind it all smooth, and hopefully you won't be able to see any of those joints after you've ground it and filled it all in. I think that's about it on the main body. There's probably stuff I missed, stuff I'll cover in future videos. I think the next video, I'm gonna be working on this. I'm thinking about maybe installing the lights, Frenching in the license plate, fixing the cracks in the front, and then I gotta start working on the floor pans. So anyway, that's it on the body. Well, that should give you a pretty good update on where we're at on this project. As you can see, there's still quite a bit to do. I hope you found it entertaining. I think when Lindsey gets back, we're gonna pull the engine out of that's in the frame now and put the 305 in there that we were working on in prior videos that you've probably seen, hopefully you've seen. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. We really need the subscribers. And I think that's it. We'll see you in the next video.